Hi everyone. Welcome today to a offshoot of where Donnie Darko was going, and that's a discussion of the terms of betweenness and manifestation. And it's a very strange thing because it does tie into free will. As long as people are trying to follow the ideas of The Secret or Course in Miracles or any of these people with wanting you to spend a lot of money to learn some sort of manifestation power so that you can get everything you want, is actually taking you farther and farther away from the real power of manifestation, which comes as you see that you don't control things like you think you do, and paradoxically, that will give you an unbelievable power of manifesting in the dream. And I'm going to try to explain a little bit of it today, a little bit that I do know. It's an unbelievably complex topic. It ties into what shamans do, what miracles are, what healing is, what prayer is, what synchronicity is. It's a massive topic. And it's a topic that Richard Rose, who founded the TAT Foundation, came up with the word betweenness, because part of this manifesting power, it happens in this gap of thought, or in this space between two elements of tension, or energy that is placed at two different poles, and within that space, as I'll describe, is the power to create. So I'm going to share some of this with you today. Like I say, this is not an easy topic. I put a lot of it in, it's a whole chapter in my book, Falling for Truth. And I'm just going to go through a few pieces of that chapter because I think at least to get my take on it, you have to read the whole chapter in the book to be able to know what I'm talking about. And I'm going to start with a quote from Rose. And that quote is, "You can move mountains, but the mountains must agree that they should be moved." And this is a really key element of what's going to happen in this whole discussion I'm going to have. Humans have way more power in the dream to manifest, to alter, to change the matrix at exceptional levels. But if you just go into it with your egoic wants and your egoic wishes, you're going to get, the matrix is going to stop you every time. And until you start to learn how to look into the matrix, into the universe, and find out what the universe wants, and start wanting that, your entire interaction with the dream changes. I can say from my own experience, the more I've been focused on what I want, specifically me, it gets much harder to flow in the dream, you might say, or to have the dream move in a particular direction that feels favorable. The more I step out of the way, the more I try to say, the universe wants this, so I'm just going to do it. I don't know why, but I'll do it anyway. Things tend to get a lot easier. So I'm going to read you a little bit of pieces of my chapter and go from there. This unfolding will happen. It's not a fulfilling of desires. And if you think you're going to try to manifest to fulfill your desires, you're going to get in its way. It's an unfolding which comes when you've walked into a state of surrender to the way things are, as opposed to the way our egoic structures want them to be. But being in a flow of surrender or a flow of acceptance doesn't necessarily mean you're just going to completely accept things the way they are. Just, oh, that's the way it is, so it's fine. It's this fine balance between the two. It's a balance between surrender, and it's a balance between trying to feel what's needed in the moment. And on a moment by moment, things will change. But there's a special quality of guidance, you might say, or an alignment that allows things to happen as they're supposed to happen. Here's another quote. You fear that if you let go, you will crash on the sides of the bank. or everything will fall apart. But you find that everything keeps moving as it should, even better than you expected if you were still trying to control it. And that's a big part of this. The more you're trying to control what's going on, the more you're going to block it. The more you surrender to what's wanted, the more things are going to change. And that's where something like The Secret or these big money gurus who are, I've seen some of these courses where you're spending thousands of dollars to go learn how to manifest your heart's desires. And you go ask them a few months later, oh, so you get everything you want now? No. Getting anything you want? Not really, no. And that's because really what's happened is just a giant self-importance of the people in charge. They figured out like a kindergarten, a grade 1 trick of how to alter a few things in the dream, and then they just decided to sell it for a massive amount of money, and then their greed fueled the greed of the people who came to the courses, and this greed cycle just made a few people at the top of the pyramid rich. It's actually a pyramid scam is what it is, this whole manifest your desires thing. But you have to look, manifesting is happening all the time. It's happening right now. You're having no part of what's going on in reality. Reality is manifesting fine without you. And the best way to allow the universe to just do its thing is to give it as little input as possible until we know what the universe wants. For example, if you cut yourself, you need a Band-Aid, right? You don't need $1 million and you don't need a snowmobile. You just need a Band-Aid. Now, if that's an authentic desire at that moment. In that moment, I need a Band-Aid to put on my cut. Now, if you're caught in a blizzard in the Northwest Territories, then you might have an authentic desire for a snowmobile. And that's this thing to start having to look, what's a egoic desire? What's just something my parasitic mind wants? And what's an authentic desire in the moment that comes from something beyond me? There's a desire for something to happen or be in the dream. And as long as the ego's in control, all you can want is bigger and better, right? Bigger houses, bigger cars, bigger boobs. But as you go deeper into an awakening process, a lot of the things that are inauthentic won't survive. The things that you thought you wanted or needed or had to have to be fulfilled or happy or whatever, they start to drop away. Because authentic desires are not about getting more stuff or strengthening our image. They're always about becoming simpler, deeper, and more in connection to the world around you. And you have to remember, there are small things that we can do. I mean, remember as kids, there was all sorts of things a kid would do that to try to give them better luck. Oh, if I do this, something bad will happen to me. And it just continues through life, right? You'll sit in the same chair, you'll carry a certain lucky charm, you'll wear a red shirt, you won't wear a red shirt because it's bad luck on a certain experience. And on some level, it's not total nonsense because something inside is telling us that there is this thing that we can connect into the matrix, that we can influence what happens around us. We just don't know what it is. And we've seen a couple of things that worked in the past. Like I remember if I taped my hockey stick a certain way and I would score a couple goals, I would try taping it the next game, which on one level was stupid because it had nothing to do with the way I taped my stick, right? There's a thousand other influences that I should have looked at. What would cause the good game? But just in my mind, it's the stick. And you take something which could be a really powerful process to understand, and the mind tries to simplify it. Oh, if I just wear this shirt, or if I just sit in this chair, everything will be fine. So on one level, it's not false, but it's not letting you go to the deepest level. And part of it is tied to what we believe. I mean, if you don't believe something is possible, at least at the subconscious level, then it's likely not possible. I think that's why extreme cases of manifesting are so rare, right? Healers can stop bleeding, but they can't reattach a leg. And it may not have to do with the healer's power. It's rather the intent of the people involved, right? We're back to the mountain. The mountain must believe it can be moved. The mountain must be in agreement it can be moved. And in some cases, you might say a miracle is nothing more than overcoming a locked view of reality. Not just of the person presenting it, but the people around it who are experiencing it. There's a reminder, right, that the New Testament talks a lot about how Christ performed all his miracles, but couldn't perform them in his hometown. And that's because no matter his faith and no matter his power, he couldn't get past the beliefs of the people who he would have grown up with, right? The people who see him as the dumb carpenter's kid who, always fell down and hurt his knee. He can't be a healer. So the limitations of the people around us will walk into what we can do and what we can't do. And that's why often the best, a healer can never really heal close family members. This is generally, I've seen this in Native traditions, I've seen this with a lot of people I know around me, that if their spouse, if one of their kids gets sick, they can't heal them. It's like it just can't happen. But if they send the person to like the healer next door, that one can handle it fine, and vice versa. And I think it's this thing where once you start seeing the flaws of the healer, once you know the healer well enough that you know that they're not perfect, they make mistakes, they do and say dumb things in their life too, the level of belief drops. And I know from reading the books on Bearhart, and I got to meet one of his grandchildren like a decade ago, and Bearhart was very clear in that part of healing that he said a huge part of what he was doing in the healing procedure was just to get the patient to believe that healing could happen. Not that he was necessarily making them believe in him per se. They were just getting them to believe that healing was possible. And he said once you had made that check mark, once you had got the person to the point like, yeah, I guess I can be healed, all of a sudden the doorway's open. But as long as the person is locked, thinking, I can't get better, I'm going to be sick only, the doors are shut, and it doesn't matter who the healer is, the healer will be shut down. And I think that's a lot of what that story about Christ is trying to say in the New Testament, that no matter the power, a person's lack of faith or lack of belief in the possibility, that doesn't mean it'll happen because you have possibility, it just means possibility opens the door. And that's the same for any bit of manifestation altering in the matrix. If you don't believe it's possible, it isn't. If you at least believe, yeah, like I could do that, or yeah, that could happen, your doorway, there's a doorway that can open for you. And it's really difficult to understand how this works. So let me try to give you a bit of an example. So this is how it's normally explained to you. This is the wrong way, but I want to give you the wrong way first, right? Which is to think about something you want. Whatever, a new pair of shoes. Okay, you want a new pair of shoes. And you're going to think about it constantly. And you're going to focus all of your mental attention, and you're going to give it images, and you're going to blow it up in your mind. I don't know, like just whatever these Tony Robbins, Joe Dispenza secret people tell you to do, right? All of this kind of crap. And what you're doing there is you are blocking the possibility because you're telling the universe, that's the box I want. It's like you have limited the universe's possibility. And as a matter of fact, not only because the universe might want something out here, it might have something way better in mind for you than the new pair of shoes. But you've already blocked the universe. I don't want what you think I want. I'm smarter than God kind of thinking. This is what I want, and I'm gonna force the dream to give it to me. Oh, try to force anyone to do anything, and usually you don't have a really good result. And even if you get it, it's quite grudgingly, and you turn out later and the shoes turn out to suck, right? So it wasn't until Eddie Traversa, really interesting guy, explained it to me, how real manifestation works, and it involves a gap of thought. So what happens is, okay, I'm interested in a new pair of shoes. So you wait until there's a moment of space between thoughts. And we're going to go into this discussion of what the gap is and how the gap is powerful in a moment, but just giving you the basic layout. In between two thoughts is a space, right? And within that space, this gap is like the power of manifestation. And what you do is you take the thought, it's hard to explain, and you project it into the gap. Okay, you project it into that space between thought. You wait till there's a space in the thought, and then you place it in, and you give it your attention. You energize the thought in that gap. It'll be brief. It'll be like 1-2 seconds, right? But you energize it into that space, and then as soon as you've energized it and put it in the space, you forget about it. This is the absolute key. Not only do you forget about it, you get to the point where you don't care. You have no interest whether the shoes appear or not. Whether you ever get new shoes again in your life, you just don't care. It doesn't matter. You've presented the want. Yeah, I'd like a new pair of shoes. This would be great. And then you put it in the gap, and then you just, yeah, whatever. I've forgotten I even wanted that. It's really subtle, and it sounds like it's simple. It's really, really difficult to learn how to do it. And you're going to have to, if you actually want to test this out as a science experiment, it's going to take you a while to learn that, I got good at it for a little while, and then I lost some of the ability to do it, and it kind of comes and it goes. And but when you have it, when you have this manifestation, this ability to put it in the gap and forget about it, it's bizarre how many things start to occur that 3 weeks later you say, oh yeah, right, I remember, I really thought about that. I really wanted that 3 weeks ago. How about that? Wow, that's pretty cool. So I'm throwing it out there. It's for example, I used to have a real weird betweenness for finding movies. Not all of your betweennesses are going to necessarily be wonderful, fantastic things, but for me, this was like 10 or 15 years ago when it used to be hard sometimes. You had to go in DVD stores and actually find certain movie DVDs. You had to really look for them, for obscure movies. And it'd be like, wow, this person, we should see this movie together. This would be a great movie to watch this weekend. I wish I could find it somewhere. And I'd forget about it. Then like 2 days later, I'd be walking by some bookstore and I'd see like video, box of used videos in the front or whatever. Oh yeah, I'll just take a look, see if there's anything interesting in the box. I've totally forgotten about it, and then there it is. There it is. It was in the box. And this would happen a lot with movies. And it's just a simple aspect of betweenness, but this can happen for some of the largest things, like could be anything. Getting the car you need to drive. All of a sudden, using betweenness the right way, it shows up in a very strange way without you actually looking for it. I mean, you're looking for it, so to speak. You're looking for a car, but you kind of have forgotten about this one. That's just fantasy. And then it shows up. The opportunity for it actually appears, and appears in such a way that it's reasonable for you. And again, you have to let go of the wish for it. You have to let go of you have to allow either result of getting it or not getting it to be fine. So any egoic attempts like positive thinking, visualization, trying to create your own reality, you're in a limited effectiveness because they have the ego as the foundation for their action. The ego wants and needs what it is wanting. Thus, by default, it'll always call up the opposite, which will stop the process. If you think about how a lot of these positive thinking / create your reality things work, this force of having to put in your time and energy and thought and really think about something. Bizarrely, if you're watching your mind really closely enough, and it took me a while to really notice this, there will automatically almost be a thought that will block it. I really want these new shoes, but new shoes are sometimes painful when you put them on. I always hurt my heels, and right away you've by focusing on the shoes, you automatically called for something that's opposite. Or in a lot of cases, a lot of this stuff, it'll be a sense of worth, right? Oh, somebody has shame or guilt, or they don't feel good enough, or there's and right away, it doesn't matter what they're wishing to manifest or what they're wishing to experience, they're blocking it because they don't feel worthy enough to have the universe grant it to them, so they start blocking it. And as you begin doing, if you actually try this as a science experiment, that's what I'm giving you, a science experiment, start watching how many times you'll get opposite blocking thoughts that will try to get in the way of it. And this leads us, and I talk next in the book in a long segment of prayer, but I have a video on prayer that you can go look at. But prayer plays into this, right? How I learned how shamans pray, how medicine people pray in the native tradition, and it leads also at the beginning of the chapter. I talked about synchronicity. Synchronicity is a kind of manifestation. It's often a manifestation of something a bit smaller, but so strange and random. You know, the book we need to read falls off the shelf at the library. The person we need to talk to who opened some door for us is, you know, again, we bump into them at the, like literally bump into them at the grocery store and knock each other over. And as we start discussing, we find out we have this connection. And it's a term created by Carl Jung, right, the famous psychologist. He's the one who created the term called synchronicity, this creation of an event that seems too coincidental and random to have happened. But you have to see, it's in this process of gap manifestation that's occurring. I put a couple in my book of some things that happened to me in one of my trips to Mexico. Some of the strangest coincidental experiences, which were, you couldn't have wrote it into a movie script. And if I actually just did a video on my synchronicities in Mexico, I was there for 3 weeks, right, going through Toltec and Mayan sites. I had a very strong purpose. The only purpose I had was, you know, I'm looking for the information of the ancient world of the Mayans and the Toltecs, and that was it. Other than that, I was open to anything. And for those 3 weeks, I could do a 2-hour video just on the synchronicities that happened in the 3 weeks going around the country. So it's like you have to have this generation of energy. That's what putting it in the gap is. It's the generation of energy. It's a focus. It's an intent. It's a direction. That part the manifestation gurus have right. You have to have a focus. But as soon as you get the focus, you just let it go. You just let it go, and you just start going about things, kind of moving in that direction. But you're not too worried one way or another if it happens. And the better you do that, the more it will. But the gap is this place. The consideration of any two opposites, this is Rose again, the consideration of any two opposites creates a third middle force, which may have nothing to do in relation to either. And enlightenment is the experience of nothingness and everything simultaneously. The uncompromisable point in the center between opposites leads to a dead stop, this tension creating the third force. And so it's a combination of space between 2 points and tension. So first, let's think about the space between 2 points. I want you to think of it as magnets. So if you take two magnets, equal magnets, and if you place them to an exact distance apart, there'll be an exact distance where the magnets are, that they will not pull each other together, nor will they repel each other. They will be in like suspended animation, in perfect harmonic balance. And that exact point in the middle, between those two magnets, will be a point of unbelievable power. Unbelievable power. And it's like what the magnets are doing is applying a form of tension, right? And tension, particularly if you're in a path of awakening or a path of finding something true, that tension is a really important part of it. You might say difficulty and pressure and challenge and getting you to look beyond the normal. The happier you are, from the searcher standpoint, the harder it is to awaken because there's no tension. You're really calm. Now, you don't want tension constantly because that will destroy the search too. You'll break the body and you'll break the mind before you have the opportunity to know anything, right? But I guarantee you, anybody out there who's watching this, and if you've awakened to anything, any part of reality, self, the dream, the matrix, outside the matrix, you know there was tension before that happened. It didn't just, your life wasn't absolutely spectacular and then you saw, oh fuck, the matrix is a piece of shit, or oh fuck, look at all these people who control the world, or no. Something in your world for a while has been difficult, and in that difficulty you internalized it somehow, found this gap, found this space, and once you got your consciousness in the space, it created this explosion of knowledge. And so it's part of the, and we're back to, again, this idea of free will. The more you're trying to control the dream, the more you're trying to force the dream to what you want, you're creating the wrong kind of tension. The dream will create, the matrix will create enough tension. Look out there. The world's, even before any of this started, go back 10 years, the world's insane. like living in this world on a day-to-day basis is nuts. And you're going to get as much tension as you need. Even if you want to go off and live by yourself in the woods in a small little hut, you've still got a lot of tension of making sure you cut down enough trees for your firewood, of finding enough food, foraging, hunting animals, doing all the skinning, it's a very free, it's a very enjoyable existence, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of tension. And if you haven't bagged a deer in a few weeks and your stocks are running low, you're getting tense, you know. There's tension there. You've got to get something to eat. And so this tension is built into the world. And anything that will get you to this stop point, this gap point, this place, because what you also need to do, sorry, it's kind of rambling a little bit, but you can see how layered this topic is. This gap point, you can also place yourself into for a short period of time, which is, you might say, a rest between the tension of the world and a clear point where the mind can see beyond its normal seeing. And so this is another part of betweenness, this use of this more universal gap point. You might think of it like the calm eye of a hurricane. So the hurricane is raging, and every once in a while you know how to move out of the hurricane into the calm eye and just either a little break, or to go into the calm eye, to go deeper into yourself or deeper into knowledge, or get answers to something, and then, okay, well, I got to get back out in the hurricane now. And this can be part of the entire reason for religious and shamanic rituals, things like chanting or exercises or dancing or any kind of these rituals. Part of it is just to occupy the mind. Occupy the mind for a while to create a space where a deeper non-ego place of power can be connected to. But if you focus on the songs or the mantra or the dancing or the ceremony or whatever, then there's no gap. You're focused on the ritual. You're focused on what's happening internally, right? If it can even be as simple as, you know, some people will take a drink to calm down before doing some important event. But if you decide you need to have 8 drinks, all of a sudden you're not going to be calm. You've lost the center. I'm not saying use drinking as an example for this, but I'm just showing you that this is some people do this. This is something they do, right? They have that one drink. Oh, now I feel okay. I can go and do that talk now or whatever. But as soon as they have 2, as soon as they have 3, as soon as they're focused on the external thing, now they go out and they sound like a moron. They're slurring their words and they sound like Foster Brooks, right? So it's all of this part of it. You can't get focused on the outside. There's a great article on this by a guy named Bart Marshall, the same guy I recommended a few videos ago. And he did a really good article called Ultimate Betweenness. I'll leave a link to it below, where he talks about the importance of working with intent and knowing what the mind is thinking and being as clear as possible. And again, avoiding double negatives. This is something you notice this a lot, right? Someone will say, I don't want to feel bad. Well, you've introduced feeling bad because you said it, right? So when you say I don't want, blah, 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 that's what the mind hears the end part, not the don't want, right? Saying I want to feel well will introduce only one direction. The mind is hearing feeling well. Darren Brown, the famous UK hypnotist, he does this all the time. If he wants someone to forget their phone number, he just asks them, try to remember your phone number. Because as soon as he uses the word try, he's indicating that you can't. When you're trying something, you haven't completed something. So try to remember your phone number. And they're gone, right? Try to remember what stop you're getting off in the subway. But I don't know. And then as soon as he said, well, you know what stop you're getting off at? Yeah, it's this one, next one coming up, It's this simple use of language. How often does you'll watch this one, how often does a mother say to her child, don't fall out of the tree? How often then is that setting up the likelihood for the kid to fall out of the tree, because that's the very thing the mother's presented to the child. If she says in something, you know, stay safe while you play, the message that's got into the child's direct mind is staying safe, not only, and playing. So playing, fun, staying safe, great idea. Probably the chances of the child getting injured are nil. And it's just that one little language. Of course, the intent of the mother's good, but the language has got into the mind the wrong way. I know it's a lot of this stuff is simple, but it's all got layers and layers and layers of importance. This eventually led into a whole lot of stuff. I talked about nature, I talked about power and the nature of power and what that is and how you work with power in nature. I talked about how this use of the gap and the use of manifestation understandings leads to something called transmission, which is actually transmitting healing energy or power to another person, why that actually can create problems for the healer if they don't do it properly. And I'll do a video on healing coming up in a week or so, and I'll get into some of these aspects along with a lot of other stuff in that video. But I'll just leave you with this last bit for this particular discussion. And that is a question that was asked: is it true that everything is already perfect, including the course of our paths? Only our understanding or perspective of it is wrong. And the answer was, now you're getting it. And that's a major step to any of this work you're doing, is seeing that something other than the individual me is control. There's not some benevolent deity or angry force. It's rather what is, just operating. And when we see ourselves as more like actors on Shakespeare's stage, playing out our roles, the more we see this, the more we start stepping out of the way, and the more we start letting this betweenness operate. And this surrendering or letting go is not something we can do. You can't surrender as an action. Surrender comes from a total acceptance of how the matrix actually is. And all of the struggling we go through, no matter what path we're walking, is just our own personal way of trying to comfort ourselves until we surrender. And it's such a challenging topic. And I mean, I've talked for 32 minutes. I'll probably get to 35 minutes or something. I mean, I've touched the surface. I've touched a tiny little piece of this, and I don't even know if anything is going to get through to you guys to say, I think I know a bit of what he's talking about, because literally we would have to talk for, even to transmit the little bit of information I have, and I'm not an expert on betweenness and manifestation by any stretch of the imagination, but even to share the little bit I've learned from my own experiences, the medicine people I've been around, shamans I've known, whatever, what they've done, we would need days of just me talking and sharing stuff, and then, oh, I think now I get it. And it's this incredible understanding. So I'm going to leave you with a quote to end this for you. And it's one of the greatest quotes, not just about betweenness, dealing with manifestation, dealing with controlling the universe without actually directly controlling it, controlling the matrix without attempting to have our hands on the dials. And I'll leave you with this last Rose quote on this topic. How do we do it? In this case, he's talking about awakening, but you can take this to any important task or any important inner work you're doing. How do we do it? We do it by carrying water on both shoulders, but not allowing it to touch either shoulder. We stagger soberly between the blades of the gauntlet with recklessness and conviction, but we pick our way out through the tulips with fear and trepidation, because the trap of the ladder is sweet. We charge the gates of heaven by urinating our way through hell, all the while sitting for 40 years on the back of the Ganges, doing nothing. We sit on the banks of the Ganges not from laziness, but from an anger at angriness, a fury against our inner fury for wasted activity. And we pull back a terrible arrow, but never let it go. And by so holding, with the universe as our target, the universe is filled with terror at our threat. If you understand a little bit of that, you'll understand just how much power you actually have if you can learn to use the secrets of betweenness. We'll see you in a few days with another video. Cheers.